The bus arrived again and again full of passengers. A woman with crutches and a bag tried to enter, but once again, she realized the futility of her next attempt. The next bus arrived, but then 4 young guys ran up to the bus with the intention of being the first to take their seats. The bus stopped. A tall man with a bag over his shoulders came up to them, pushed these guys away with a strong hand, and nodded to the woman. "Girl, come in." She looked at him in surprise and began to clumsily climb. Strong hands fell on her waist, and she found herself in the passenger compartment of the bus. The man ordered the boy sitting in the front seat, "Get up." He hurriedly got up, seeing a woman with crutches. The woman nodded to the man. "Thank you." The woman asked the driver, "Please stop at the next stop." She got up, paid, and began to leave, but a little earlier the same man did it. He got out and helped her out. The woman smiled. "Thank you. Do you live nearby?" "No, I spent 10 years in prison from where I was released. My friend should live in the city, but he disappeared somewhere. So what now?" "I will accompany you and I will decide what to do next." He held out his hand. "Give me your bag. Don't be afraid of me." She let go of the handle of her bag. "Thank you." "What is your name?" "Nancy." "And my name is Larry." "Larry, why were you in prison?" He smiled sadly. "If 10 years, then for something serious." "Where are you going now?" "I will sleep somewhere, and tomorrow I will decide what to do next." The girl nodded her head. "Larry, this is my house. 4th entrance." "Would you like to be escorted to your apartment?" "No, I live on the ground floor." "Okay, Nancy, goodbye." He handed her the bag, turned and walked away. She called out to him, "Larry." He stopped. "What, Nancy?" "Stay with me. Where are you going now?" He approached her, looking at her with sad eyes, and said, "Aren't you afraid of me? I've been in prison for 10 years. "Why should I be afraid? Let's go too." They entered the apartments. The apartment is 1 bedroom and clean. The landlady nodded at the room. "Come in. Now I'm going to cook something for dinner." Then she went to the kitchen. The guests followed her. "Let me help you. We can talk." They began to drink tea while the soup was boiling, and they talked. "Nancy, what's wrong with your legs?" "I've had such legs since childhood. I grew up in an orphanage. I was examined by different doctors when I was little, but something..." She sighed heavily. "Then no one needed me, and even more so now." Clear. I constantly look about this on the internet. They write that my legs can be healed, but even an online consultation is expensive there, and my pension is only enough for the bare necessities. She sighed heavily again. "I'm used to my situation. I'm 27 years old. I'm already 42 years old." The woman smiled. 42 is the dawn for you." Then she got up and walked over to the stove to continue cooking. And Larry noticed that the crutches stood aside, and a wooden plank about 10 centimeters thick lay under her leg, which was shorter. In addition, both legs were twisted. A terrible thought flashed through his head. How can he get used to this? After dinner, they had a question. Where will the guests sleep? Nancy never had such a question. She never had guests. Sometimes a neighbor came to her for tea, but the man has not yet slept with her. "Nancy, don't worry. I'll sleep on the floor because I'm already used to it." Nancy couldn't calm down. "I'm sorry, I invited you, but you have nowhere to lie down." Larry spread out a blanket and pillow in the kitchen and went to bed. He thought that he would spend only one night there, and tomorrow he would again go looking for his friend, who had their common money left and on whom his future life depended. He hadn't slept well the last 3 nights, so he fell asleep instantly. Nancy couldn't sleep for a long time that night. After all, today she met an extraordinary man. People are often indifferent to the grief of others, and that never happened to her. She thought to herself, how extraordinary to have such a man pay attention to you. At the bus stop, I had no idea that this could happen to me. Then he walked me home. We cooked together. What a happiness. But for some, it's commonplace. She lay for a long time, remembering every moment spent with him. And suddenly, she thought of what had frightened her at first. She really liked this man. She has already resigned herself to the fact that she will live alone all her life, that she will never have a husband and even a friend. She began to drive away these thoughts from herself. No, this will never happen. He saw my ugly legs. No man can overcome disgust. And I'm a woman. I really want at least a small piece of happiness. Nancy fell asleep only in the morning, and she dreamed that she was lying on the green grass and looking at the dark sky, through which the pictures of her life were floating. Suddenly, the sky became clear and she saw herself walking on her feet towards Larry. She woke up from the sound of the door being closed. Tears welled up in her eyes. He's gone, and he didn't even say goodbye. What was I hoping for? He didn't promise to return. This will never happen. No man will ever tell me, I love you. I will never have a child. She cried until she fell asleep. She seems to have resigned herself to the inevitable. The creak of the door being opened not only woke her up, but also made her rise sharply. She fumbled for her crutches and stood up without taking her eyes off the room door. His voice rang out. It's me. I went grocery shopping. The woman's heart was beating wildly. He entered the room with a bouquet of flowers in his hand. Nancy, this is for you. The crutches fell out of her hand and the ceiling flashed before her eyes. Strong hands didn't let her fall. Nancy, what's wrong with you? She opened her eyes. His frightened face was in front of her. She said in confusion, I don't know. She sat down, not taking her frightened eyes off of his face, and suddenly she hugged him by the neck, not controlling her actions, and said through tears, Don't leave me. He smiled. I won't leave if you don't kick me out. I won't kick you out. Let's go get some coffee. Half an hour later, they were sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee and cake. Nancy listened to their plans for the future, not taking her happy eyes off his face. I need to go to the police today and get registered. I have money. We were transferred money to a card for work in prison, and for 10 years I accumulated a decent amount. I'll try to get a job right away. He shared his plans with her for a long time, and she didn't really understand what he was talking about. But his last phrase brought the woman back to reality. You must find out everything about your illness. Find out where it's treated and how much it costs. She lowered her head sadly. Larry, we won't have enough money for the treatment. He stood up. We will try to find money. Okay, I'll go to the police to register. He saw that the woman was sitting with her head down, went up to her, hugged her, and said, Nancy, stop being sad. I don't have anyone in the world either. He leaned over and whispered in her ear, Except you. Larry returned in the afternoon. Nancy managed to cook dinner and sit at the computer. Larry immediately began to tell. They told me that I have to come to the police 3 times a month. They also advised me to get a job. What were you doing? Did you find out anything about your legs? She lowered her head. I have to go to a consultation in another city. I think it's all useless. The prices are huge. Nancy, don't worry. We will decide. During the day, they managed to look for a job for Larry on the internet and go shopping. Either they were tired of loneliness or fate decided so, but they were more and more drawn to each other. 3 days later, they went to another city for a consultation at the best clinic. Of course, the consultation was paid. After being examined by specialists, the head doctor of the clinic received them in his office. I'll immediately say that your case is complicated. Treatment will take place in 3 stages. That is, you will be in the clinic for half a year and at home for a year. Then you will have rehabilitation. In a couple of years, you will be a healthy woman. And the doctor smiled at Nancy. The head doctor waited until the woman got rid of her rainbow dreams and continued. Each stage of treatment, together with surgeries and maintenance at the clinic, plus rehabilitation, will cost you $100,000. The doctor turned to the man. Do you agree? Larry confidently nodded his head. Yes. They left the clinic and got into a called taxi. In the taxi, both were occupied with their own thoughts. Of course, their thoughts were different, but about one thing. But if God caused them to meet, then He will help them. Nancy felt Larry start suddenly. Larry, what's the matter with you? But he was looking out the window of the taxi at the man who got out of the luxury car, who, with a masterful step, went into the office. It was his friend, that friend. He put his arm around his girlfriend and held her close. Nancy, everything will be fine. The next day, Larry again went to the city. This time he went alone. He went to the same building where he saw his friend, but that car was not in the parking lot. He sat down on a bench and waited. He waited for at least an hour. Finally, a car appeared, from which the man he was looking for got out. He ordered something to his driver and went to the office. "Steve!" He turned and looked closer. "Larry, is that you?" "As you can see, it's me." They hugged, forgetting everything that happened 10 years ago. His friend was not to blame for what happened to Larry then. Steve put a hand on his shoulder and said, "Okay, let's go." They entered a restroom. They entered a room. Steve took out a bottle of cognac and glasses. "Let's drink to the meeting." They ate chocolate, and Larry got straight to the point. "Steve, I need the money." "Larry, let me decide everything, because it will be more correct. Do you agree?" "Okay, I agree. I will put $1 million in a bank account in your name at 2% per annum. After all, we had about $1 million 10 years ago. 2% is $20,000 a year. You will not withdraw this million yet. This will be enough for you and future children." Steve filled the glass, nodded his head, and continued. "That's not all. You will move from this city, and you will come to work with me as Deputy Chief of Security. Maybe sooner I'll retire my Chief of Security. You will also get a good salary every month. Steve, I'm under administrative supervision." His friend smiled. "Now we'll figure it out." He took out his phone, dialed a number, and turned on the speakerphone. "Hi, Mr. Emerson." "Hi, Steve." "I have a problem. My friend lives in another city and he is under administrative supervision, and he needs to move to my city for permanent residence." "What's your friend's name?" "Larry Michaels." "Now I'll call, and he will be removed from supervision." He put the phone down on the table. "Larry, your supervision issue is resolved. Now, do you agree?" "I agree, but..." His friend laughed again. "Oh, yes." Then he went to the safe, took out 4 packs of banknotes and placed them in front of Larry. Steve asked again, "Do you agree now?" "Of course I agree. You also decided everything for the two of us 10 years ago." Larry returned home to Nancy only in the evening. He hugged her. "A new life begins for us. We're going to the clinic tomorrow." "And money?" He took out and placed in front of the woman packs of banknotes. "Oh my God, I've never seen so much money. Where did you get them?" "I met my friend. He gave them to me. Now he is a successful businessman. He offered me a good job in his company. I will visit you every day at the clinic." "Thank you, Larry." "Nancy, why are you crying?" "Larry, I cry with happiness. Why are you doing all this for me?" "I love you. I want you to be my wife." She looked at him with wide eyes for a minute. Nancy wept with happiness, buried in his shoulder, but continued. "I agree, but let's wait until I can walk without crutches. I want you to have a healthy bride." It's been 2 years. Long separations were replaced by months when they were together. Larry bought a huge apartment. 6 months ago, Nancy was discharged from the clinic. She walked out of there without crutches. A month later, Larry and Nancy became husband and wife. Today, she was waiting for him from work, as always. Her husband was the head of security at a large firm run by their friend Steve. Her husband was often late at work. She was used to it, but today she wanted him to come home as soon as possible. After all, she has such amazing news, and so he went home. She immediately threw herself on his neck. "Larry, we will have a baby!"
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak. "There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only." "Absolutely right." His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. and he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "Alright, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next." Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. "If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you." I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.